Thank you for coming. The weather's beautiful, right? And you chose to come here. That means a lot to me. It really does. I just want to let you know that. What I'm going to tell you today is just some, I don't know, down-home wisdom. It's just what I've learned over the years in my journey from my roots. And so I'm going to do a little bit of sharing of some lessons I've learned, and then storytelling, of course, because everybody said they wanted stories. So okay, I'll tell stories. And I hope you haven't heard the stories before, but some of you may, some of you may not have. So anyway, I'm going to start out by talking about the First Lady, Jackie Kennedy. I want you to picture her if you can in your mind. She said, and she firmly believed, when you tell something deeply personal about yourself to other people that you don't know, it ceases to be yours. She was the daughter of a very well-to-do New York couple, and she became known, as you know, for her exquisite style and her elegance. Jackie had the best private education possible. She wrote poems and stories, she drew illustrations, she studied ballet, and one of Jackie's elementary teachers described her this way: a darling child, the prettiest little girl, very clever, very artistic, and full of the devil. Now my life, when I look back on it, had virtually no resemblance to Jackie's life. She became the First Lady when I was 4 months old. We were born into vastly different stations in life. I was born to struggling Iowa farmers. My parents both grew up in homes where there was a lot of physical and emotional abuse. And they were determined to come together to rise above that. But all of life, really, honestly, in my growing up years was a struggle. I was not the prettiest little girl. Actually, I've never been little. I was not particularly clever or artistic, but I was full of the devil. Jackie's father and mine, well, they both owned stock. Jackie's father owned financial stock, and mine owned livestock. We both rode horses. As soon as she could walk, she had elite equestrian training. Well, I rode bareback. And sometimes I bothered to get the bridle and the saddle out of my grandfather's barn. We both loved to write. She became a magazine editor, and I edited student papers, sorry. We both attended church very faithfully. She was a devout Catholic, and I grew up Protestant. Jackie loved history, and she loved her country, as do I. I don't know if you know this about the First Lady, but she raised a lot of private money to literally transform that White House into a museum of American history and culture. She wanted to inspire patriotism. She wanted to inspire public service for all the visitors who came. She actually spent a lot of effort procuring art and furniture from past presidents, including George Washington and James Madison and Abraham Lincoln. And she filled the White House with period pieces and art throughout American history. And these were her words. She said, "Everything in the White House must have a reason for being there. It would be a sacrilege merely to redecorate it. It must be restored." And I admire that so much about Jackie. And I hoped to create my classroom over the years as a place that just reflects who I am and my travels and my experiences and my love of art and of all things global. Though I was raised as a staunch Republican, I grew up admiring this learned, beautiful, eminently classy woman. And my parents actually found no fault with her, except that she married a Kennedy. I wanted to be this beautiful brown-eyed brunette like Jackie. I didn't want to be a blonde. Blondes were pretty common where I was from. And I dreamt of seeing the world as Jackie had seen the world. I know it must have been a huge step for Jackie to go from Massachusetts into the White House. You know what a big step it was for me to leave the farm and go to Chicago? It's a giant step for me, a step out into the world. Jackie and I both stepped out of our comfort zones, and we stepped into the unknown. So here's the first lesson I learned. Are you hearing me? Comfort is overrated. Comfort is overrated. I have discovered that the wonders of life are actually found on the edges of your comfort zone. There's a great poet that I love. He's a Persian poet from the 13th century, Rumi, and he said, "Live where you fear to live." As a young child, I found myself simultaneously living in a world that was carefree, a world that was happy, but at the same time living on this Iowa farm, there were moments of absolute terror for me. I'm going to tell you a story. These are all true stories, I promise you. You could ask my siblings. They'll tell you they're true. One day my dad said to my mom, you see that silo, the oldest one? That's got to go. And she was like, well, how do you propose to get rid of a silo? You all know a silo is a big, tall structure with brick, okay? He said, well, I'm going to take it down. She said, well, what are you going to do, get some dynamite? He said, no, that's too much trouble. He said, I'm just going to get a sledgehammer. And she was like, you're going to sledgehammer that silo down? And he goes, yeah, you and the kids can just come out and watch it. So they set a date. They went to church on Sunday morning and prayed first. And then, literally Sunday afternoon, we went out and Dad put my mom and us 3 little kids into the cab of a pickup. And he said, now watch this. Your dad is going to take down that silo. He said, I've spent some time thinking about how I can do this, and I'm going to sledgehammer that thing to the ground. He said, the bricks are going to start flying, but before they fall and hit me in the head, I'll beat the bricks. I remember from the cab, my fingers were over, you know, I was watching my dad as he was slamming, he was with all his might. He was a big guy. He was like me, only a bigger version. Hitting that silo, and the bricks started to fly. You know, there goes 2, and there's 10, and there's 15. And then every once in a while he'd stand back and he'd look, and this thing would start to wobble and lean. And all of a sudden, I'll never forget, he yelled and he ran. I mean, he ran so fast, and the whole thing just came down. And my mom was like, well, at least you kids didn't see your dad die. That's true story. My dad took down 2 more silos. And finally, with the 4th one, my mom said, if you do that, I'm divorcing you. And he never did it again. My dad, also, when I was 3 years old, my mom was frustrated often with me because I was a little devil. And my older sister had gone off to preschool at the local library, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd never been without my older sister. She was 16 months older than me, and she went off to preschool, and I wanted to go too, and I didn't get to go, so I was, you know, being a pistol. And we had a rocking chair that you could spin in this way. So I sat in the rocking chair, and I began to spin, and I spun for about an hour. And she also had a baby that was crying, and she said to my dad, look, I'm sick of her. You know, she's just spinning. That's all she's doing. Take her with you when you go to the other farm. So my dad put me in the truck, and he said to me, now we got to go get a load of hay. Now this other farm was miles and miles away. And on the way back, we got this load of hay, and we were on a hill. Yeah, there are hills in Iowa. And the clutch went out of the pickup. I'm 3. No power steering. That truck was a 1956 Chevy, red. And I will never forget, my dad said to me, we're on a hill. Nobody's going to come by to rescue us. This is very rural. You know, it's just, there just weren't cars that went by. And he said, you know, he said, I need your help. He said, your dad's going to get out, I'm going to get out, and I need to go underneath the truck, and I need to fix the clutch. So I need you to get down here on the floor. I am 3. I need you to get down here, and I need you to hold this pedal down. Not that one, and not that one, but that one. That's the brake. You need to hold that down. Now, if you let up on that pedal, your dad is going to die, and you're going to end up at the bottom of the hill with the whole wagon load of hay. And I remember getting down on the floor, and I pushed down on the pedal, and I was pushing, and it was no power brakes on that thing. And I remember, I don't think I can hold this. I don't think if my sister was here, she would help me, but she's not here. And I was thinking I was going to cry, and I knew if I cried, I'd lose my strength, and my dad would die, and I'd end up with hay at the bottom of the hill. And so I held on, and I held on, and I heard my dad in the trunk going tink, 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 tink. He was fixing this broken clutch. Pretty soon he got up, he got in the cab, slammed the door, patted me on the leg and said, "That a boy." Now don't you ever tell your mother. I was married before I told my mother. But you know, yeah, those were pretty terrifying events, but I also learned to take risks. My dad had a lot of faith in me, and faith in a 3-year-old. I know it was stupid, and I would never do that, and I would never, I mean, it was ridiculous, really. But he was so proud of me, and I learned that when things are really challenging, I can do this. I can follow through. If he believes I can do it, I can do it. And I remember being very determined as a child. If my dad thinks I can do it, I can do it. And I kept that determination with me. When I graduated from college, there were no jobs to be had. And when I was asked, 2 women asked, they're friends of mine, would I help to start this school? It's completely ridiculous. In an impoverished neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, I was a rural girl. What did I know about a city? But they asked me to help them start this school, kindergarten through 8th grade, so I started the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade program. And I was there in its first year. The school went for 26 years. It was not a physically safe neighborhood. We were out of money by October. I had to write all the curriculum. I had to help raise money. I had to teach all subjects. You know, it was pretty, like, crazy. But I was full of determination that if my life was going to mean something, I was going to do whatever came my way. I was going to serve people to the best of my ability, and I could do it if I was determined. And so I learned so much through that experience. That's so much from starting the school in the inner city of Chicago. So I urge you to take this giant leap of faith to help humanity. I don't care where you end up in life, but take a giant leap of faith. And by that I don't mean go to Costa Rica and jump off on what do you call those things that you
zip line?
Zip line. Don't just zip line across the treetops. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking a really meaningful leap for humanity wherever you find yourself. Time is our most precious resource. That's the second thing I learned. We all have 24 hours in a day. You can't hoard those hours. You can't go back in time. So just stop and figure out, how do I want to spend my time and my energy? What kind of life do I want to build? Do I want a balanced life? Okay, be intentional. What does that look like? And follow your intention. Because the hours are precious. The other thing, the next thing I learned is, this is lesson 3, is money is overrated. Now, be careful. We need money to live. Let me just say something. I'm really thankful that I grew up in a small town. And I did some looking at statistics, and in the year 2014, Americans gave to charity $360 billion. Only 14% of it came from rich people. 5% came from corporations. Where did the other 81% come from? People. What kind of people?
Non-corporate
Yes.
people.
People of very modest means. And when they look into the data, they find out that communities like Clayton, where more than 40% of the people who live in a neighborhood like this, who make $200,000 a year or more, they give no more than 2.8% of their incomes to charity. That actually a huge portion of what's being given is actually given by people of very modest means. And that was an example that my parents set for me. Even when they didn't have much money, they were always thinking about people who had less than we did. And so people have taken a look at how much money Americans give, how generous we are, and they found out that we give 7 times as much as a continental European. We give twice as much as a Canadian. And when you look at the numbers, we're like, well, who are these people that are giving? And why are they giving? The data looks, and there could be some disagreement about this, but what I found was we are, number one, a highly religious country. And people who are very religious and practice their religion often typically are the most generous people. And Protestant evangelicals, and I grew up one, and Mormons happen to be the most generous in terms of giving to charity. Not only that, but they give more to secular charities than secular people do. And it's a long tradition in our country where we have a country of mutual aid, where we help our neighbors. I grew up in that kind of a world. You helped your neighbors. And we also have an entrepreneurial spirit. If you're blessed, and I hope you are, I hope you're blessed with overwhelming surplus, financial surplus in your life, don't forget to share it. Please share it with those who are less fortunate. Why? To help them, to boost them, because when you boost the people at the bottom, it boosts all of us in society. So thank goodness for my small town upbringing where the physician lived right next to the plumber. Because I grew up in a community where people truly did give to charity. One day, I remember the sheriff came to my dad. Well, I wasn't there when he came to my dad, but my dad came home and said, the sheriff came to me and he said, hey, I got this 18-year-old and he won't stay out of trouble. He's constantly in the county jail. He said, the guy needs a mentor. What the kid needs is a man in his life. And he asked him, do you have a job for him? And my dad said, well, I can make a job. So he talked to the sheriff and he came home and he asked us, hey, how would you guys like a fireplace? We had an 1861, it was built in 1861, farmhouse. We were like, yeah, fireplace would be cool. So every morning, I still remember the sound of my dad getting out of bed, zipping up his pants, I can hear it to this day, putting his boots on, stomping across the floor. I could hear the roar of the truck, and he would take off at dawn to the jail. And he would go get this 18-year-old, who my dad called Squire. I don't know why, because, you know, a squire is a guy who serves a knight. So maybe my dad thought of himself as a knight, I don't know. But he always called him Squire. And Squire and my dad would go out into the fields and they'd pick up all the rocks that came up. The rocks that come up in the spring of the year after the thaw. And they would bring all these limestone rocks home and they piled them up. And together my dad and Squire made a beautiful limestone fireplace to add to this house. And my dad would mentor him and teach him. And my dad paid him and taught him discipline, hard work, and the reward of good pay. So that's the kind of life that my dad's example he set for me, and I challenge you to do that no matter what your station in life is, to think about people who are less fortunate than you, and always be positive. Good old Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the only person that you're destined to be is the person you decide to be. It's a decision. And when I was little, I knew I was destined to be a teacher, and my mom confirmed that. But then, as I got to high school, I didn't hear people saying good things about teachers. They said, you know, teaching is kind of, you know, they said it in disparaging ways. So I thought I shouldn't be a teacher, but then I was so pulled toward education because I get to influence your thinking, the next generation. It's what I would say is a soft power, you know, you get to influence people. And so I hope that I have influenced you for the good, and that in your lives, wherever you end up, think about the power, the positive power that you have to influence others. Whether it's a classroom, whether it's a clinic, whether it's in the boardroom, whether you're in business, you, and in your family too, the ability to positively impact others. And please remember to accept failure. Accept it graciously. Don't think about what should be, just accept what is. There was a time we struggled as farmers, and I remember the banker coming out and telling my dad, I am sorry, I have to take your farms. You're not going to be able to pay the debts that you owe. And my dad begging him, you can take the farms, but don't take the one we live on. So they took all of our farms except for the one that we were living on, and my dad held a sale. I had to watch all of our livelihood go. They sold all of our equipment, all of our machinery. They sold the cows that I milked. We sold everything. And I remember my dad going out behind the barn, and I went and talked to him after the sale, and it was a cold February day, and he said, I don't know what I'm going to do now. This whole farm thing was a failure. I'm going to have to find another job. But one thing I know for sure is that you kids will have milk to drink, because there was one cow we did not sell. We went to bed that night. I was worried about it. What's my dad going to do? You know, how are we going to eat? Got up the next morning, and that one cow had strangled itself in the stanchion. Got its chain wrapped around the stanchion, and it died. We didn't even have milk. That cow must have been so distressed with the herd gone. And I remember overhearing my dad talk to my mom saying, I don't know how I'm going to feed these kids. I mean, we came home, I kid you not, we came home, and sometimes the only thing we had to eat was my mom's canned tomatoes, string beans, and cabbage soup. Because we didn't even have milk, we started drinking warm powdered milk. Ugh. But, you know, my dad did find another path in life. He made enough money, and it was because of the failure, the farm failure, that we actually, myself and my siblings, got to go to college. So every failure, just keep moving forward, because you've got things to learn, and you don't know what's around the next turn. We didn't know, but we just kept moving forward. Okay, so spend time to being curious and wondering about the world. Here's my advice to you. Wonder, wonder, wonder as if you're a 3-year-old. Ask why. Why? 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 Keep asking that question. I'll never forget one day I was a little kid and I asked my dad, how come that bird on the electric line there, how come it sits on there and it doesn't just get electrocuted? And he said, well, I can't really answer the question. I decided, I wonder why. So I'm just going to observe. My sister and I used to play the game, electrocution game. Have you ever played that? You grab a hold of the electric fence, you see who can hold on the longest. Now, do you think I won or do you think my sister won?
You.
No. My sister is more stubborn than I. She always won, and one day I noticed that my dad could grab that electric fence no problem. He didn't get shocked. And I was like, what is it about him that's different? Oh, he has on thick rubber boots. He's got on some rubber gloves. We always had gloves on. Canvas or rubber gloves and rubber boots or tennis shoes. So I waited till one day, I put my thick-soled rubber boots on and I put my rubber gloves on. My sister didn't have either on, she had the canvas. And I said, you know what, let's play that electrocution game. And I won. From what I remember about that, and I decided it's really important to always wonder, it's important to learn, and in the meantime, it's good to win too. Okay? So you can play the electrocution game, but I looked up online, they don't recommend it. Well, one last story. All through my life, I love adventure. What can I see? What can I learn? Where can I go? I absolutely love adventure, and I sometimes am a little reckless like my father. I've taken my family on some pretty ridiculous and crazy and dangerous horseback rides. So the last one I took the family on, my husband and our son and friend, they decided to go mountain climbing. And so I had myself, my daughter, and her girlfriend. And so I thought, well, you know what, let's just go like horseback riding. That would be awesome, like some places where nobody goes. So I started calling every stable, every stable I could possibly find within the vicinity of Rocky Mountain National Park. And I called stable after stable, and this is what I asked them. Hey, I want to take a horseback ride. Do you guys have a cowboy? I mean like a real cowboy and some horses that we could, rent for the day? Yeah, sure, we know how to ride horses. Well, okay, I grew up riding horses. My daughter had ridden them around, stables, and her girlfriend had never ridden any horses. And I'm like, I really, really, really want an exciting horseback ride, not one of these boring horseback rides. So they go, well, actually, that's really weird. You should ask that. Ask that question. Like, that's an unusual question, but we have this guy. He is a real cowboy. He doesn't have a home. He just rides his horse from Canada, from northern Canada, down to South America. And he rides rodeo, and when he makes money, when he wins, like in the rodeo, then he can, he buys the supplies he needs and things, and sometimes he cleans stables for cash or whatever. But yeah, he's around, and we have some horses we can rent. Are you sure you know how to ride horses? Oh yeah, we know how to ride horses. Oh, so we show up, and I meet this guy. He's the legit deal. I mean, he's scarred up, he's tough. I mean, this guy, he's got the cowboy everything. And so he goes, so who's ridden the most? And I'm like, well, actually, I have. And he goes, well, you'll like that horse a lot. I get on the horse, and he goes, she's great. She's only been tamed now for about 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh, I'm not that good. But I'm into this now. I've paid. I'm in. And he goes, she's great. He puts my daughter on a horse, and he puts her friend on a horse. And he goes, so that's great to know that you guys all know how to ride. And we take off. And he goes, I've never been to this waterfall or anything. This is going to be a great adventure. And away we go. He said, we're going to be fine as long as we don't see a mountain lion or anything that spooks these horses, because if we do, they're just going to bolt. Oh, God. So I'm like this for mountain lions. Anyway, so then I decide to relax, and he's like laying back on his horse. He's looking up at the sky. He's reading the weather. He's telling me all these adventures that he has on horseback, how he had dropped out of high school. This was the life. He was just going to live this till the day he died, blah, blah, blah. I'm getting the whole story. And it throws her off the back of the horse. And her horse turns to bolt to try and get through the trees to get away. And her friend, who's never ridden a horse before, reaches out, grabs the bridle, and hangs onto the horse. And now the horses are all just, they're all going crazy. My horse doesn't even know what to do. And this cowboy is like, you have never ridden a horse. So I look at that, though, but what a great story. It's all good. Why not? That's what I told my husband when I got down, and he's like, you could have killed everyone. And I'm like, but we didn't. So what are you worried about? So, what I'm saying is I just recommend that you live outside your comfort zone. And I know you all feel like bolting about right now yourselves. But thank you for staying. Thank you for listening. I hope I haven't gone too long. And I'll answer any questions that you might have, anything that you would want to know. It's been my greatest joy and pleasure to be a teacher here at Clayton and to have all of you in my classes. And thank you for coming out. I'm going to miss you all terribly, but now we can be Facebook friends.